football is on the rise. The World Cup in Australia and New Zealand just over a month ago is proof of that. It was a tournament which not only showcased the very best talent that we have in the women's game, but it also showed just how competitive nations across various continents are becoming in helping to close the gap at the top. Now, the game is growing, there's no question about that, and it's growing at lightning speed. But despite the progress that's been made in recent years, there's still very much a long way to go, and there's still a lot of work to be done. In particular, around the promotion of inclusivity and equality, and in demonstrating how the positive impact these women athletes are having on the game should actually become the norm. Mercury 13, the next big step in women's football. Where's the game headed? And what opportunities are out there to create more visibility and expansion? Well, please allow me to welcome to the stage your next speakers to take a deep dive on this subject. Victoire Cogevina Reynal, CEO and founder of Mercury 13. Luis Vicente, who's putting in quite a shift today, going from moderator to panelist, Apex Capital. Chairman, Michael Broughton, partner at Acceleration Equity. Ebru Kuksal, chair at Women in Football. And last but not least, your moderator, David Hellier, business reporter at Bloomberg. So David, whenever you're ready, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm David Hellier. I'm a business reporter at Bloomberg. And for the last 4 or 5 years, I've been writing mainly about football club transactions, M&A for the football business. And until a few weeks ago, although I write about women's football as well in terms of the World Cup broadcasting situation and increasing viewing figures in women's football, I hadn't written about a deal as such. And then I came across Mercury 13, who have a really interesting concept for women's football, which is so far been, women's clubs have ridden on the back of men's clubs largely, not completely obviously in America, but in Europe and South America. And Mercury 13 are proposing a very exciting project to invest in around a dozen women's football clubs specifically. And there's no better person to tell you about the vision than Victoire. So over to you to tell everybody.
Thank you very much for being here. David was actually the person that instigated this whole launch. Firstly, also, I'm very glad to be back at the World Football Summit stage. I was here last year on this very same stage, selling Gloria, and now I'm back with a new project next to my founders and also my mentors. I've known these wonderful people for many years, and they've joined me on this incredible new mission. And I'm also joined by my 3-month-old daughter, who is in the audience right now. So it's a very, very, very special day for me. So I'll start by telling you a little bit about why we started Mercury 13. And so I was the VP of women's football at OneFootball until very recently. And when I was about 8 months pregnant, I decided to resign. Understanding that women's football was only going to grow if it was independent from a big corporation. At the end of the day, when you've done great business with men's football for so many decades, it is hard to take out the attention and invest it into something as new as women's football. And so I knew that my next step, whichever was going to be, beyond being a mother, was also gonna be one of entrepreneurship. And so at that same time, I started getting a lot of calls from different women's football clubs looking for investment, following the Angel City model and understanding that there was a lot of investors interested in doubling down onto this new category in the sport. And so, I started making introductions, and by the third one, I was like, wait, I need to do this myself. I need to be the one raising the capital and then investing it. But the most important thing that I need to do is surround myself by a world-class management team. So a lot of you probably know all of the people here. They need no introduction, but they are a testament to what this project is here to do. Women's football teams until now, until Mercury 13, have not had the investment, not only of capital, but resources, know-how, and talent that it needed to really explode. We've seen a massive growth over the last few years. There's no doubt about that. The Women's World Cup was a great success. But now it's time to really put our money where our mouth is, which I think is a big missing piece here. And so that's what Mercury 13 is here to do. We're raising $100 million to essentially buy in between 8 to 12 women's football clubs across Europe and Latin America. I'll briefly explain our investment thesis, and then we can get into a conversation. We are looking for a controlling stake. That's very important for us. If we're going to bring in a management team that's going to help on the commercial side, that's going to help on the footballing side, we need to make sure that we affect the destiny of the clubs that we invest in. We're doing in a very specific geo, that is Europe and Latin America. Of course, there's going to be opportunity to go outside of it, but I think the first question that we always get is, what about the United States? Well, the United States has seen a ton of growth in the NWSL, with valuations starting with a franchise fee in 2019 of $500,000, and now with the San Francisco expansion that paid $53 million. That's only happened in 4 years. There's also talks about a new franchise in Miami for $100 million. So it's growing a lot, and we think that that's going to also happen in Europe. And so this is really where Mercury 13 starts its work. The commercial side is going to be very important. The next few years of women's football is all about commercializing the product. And most importantly, and this is the big vision of Mercury 13, is how do we invite for the first time in 100 years a new audience into football, which are women. I've been talking about this for a decade. I'm even tired of hearing myself say it so much, but it is true. Until now, the sport has been built, developed, sold, and marketed mainly to men, overseeing the other half of the world. And so Mercury 13 really wants to commercialize these clubs and build brands that talk to women, that think about women, whether it's in-stadium experience. I had an unfortunate experience in the UK where I couldn't bring a pram with my baby. How is that? Stadiums should have infrastructure for moms. They should also be serving rosé and oatmeal lattes and speaking to us female consumers. And we believe here at Mercury 13 that we can achieve that. So I'll stop there. There's a lot to talk more, but I want everyone to pitch in as well.
Yeah, I wonder, Ebru, because you've been an executive on a men's club in Turkey, how Galatasaray, how important is it, do you think, that in this case these clubs are going to be women-run as opposed to within a men's framework?
Good afternoon, everybody. You've seen me on stage here before talking about women's football, and this time, finally, after so many years, calling out the lack of investment in the game. I'm very happy to be part of a wonderful organization that is going to try to close that gap. David, your question is a very important one. I've served now on boards for more than 13 years, where unfortunately, I've been pretty much the only woman on the boards, and the expectation usually is that The female board member is supposed to fight for budgets for women's football or talk about gender equality. But that shouldn't be the case. I think it should be on everybody's agendas. But if we look at the composition of boards globally within the governing bodies, national associations, only about 3 to 4% of the decision makers are women, unfortunately. You would think that the UK Premier League clubs are better, only 9% are women. In EFL, only 5% are women. And what happens usually is a pattern of decision making which is unable to ask the question sometimes, why not, or what if? You know, what if we were to invest more in women's football? Or why not, you know, spend more on women's football than we make? So those are two important questions sometimes the boards are not necessarily asking themselves. So for us, what's important is there has been always an underrepresentation and underinvestment in both female leadership, but also women's football. If you look at the Deloitte report that was published now the second time for women's football, yes, the clubs are spending money, the top clubs, but even the biggest club like Barcelona or Arsenal is not spending any more than maybe 7, 8, 9 million, which is only about 10% of their revenues. And if you look at FIFA, I think they've come a long way in terms of the budget allocated. Gianni Infantino said during the Women's World Cup convention that FIFA spent in the last 4-year cycle 1 billion on women's football out of the total budget of 7.6, so that's a significant amount, but it's still a huge gap. So we are coming in to fill that investment gap, but also equally try to run these women's clubs in a way that is more focused on the product and not as an afterthought in a men's club.
Thank you. I wonder if I could come to you, Louis, now. You've obviously been involved in the sports industry for such a long time, and you've got experience of multi-club management and broadcasting. Mercury 13 could have invested just in one football club, but it's deciding to this multi-club approach, which is pretty common in the men's game. What are the benefits of that strategy?
Thank you, David, for this question. I think it's very important to also demystify it once and for all. Thank you very, very much, everyone, to be here. I think it's an important day for women's football, and I think there is, a great journey that starts today. I think today, as we all know, we live in a global world, right? We live in a world that is hyper-connected, a world that also is very different, right? Again, we know we have a lot of different cultural approaches, very different, demographics, and very different audiences, right? So, as we see in many businesses, digital businesses, technology businesses, consumer businesses, so aggregating and basically merging, different businesses in one has been a proven solution for many years. I think in football the problem has always been the lack of execution on the purpose, right? I think there was always a lot of expectations on what a multi-club network could deliver, and I think maybe today I'm still, looking to see what is the first multi-club network that is going to achieve that, and I think we're going to be the first to effectively run, a proper strategy and run a proper execution to deliver the results you want. I think today you have great cases of networks that were very successful from a commercial point of view. I think you have others that were very successful from a player development point of view. I think others, did a so-so job on building new audiences and building, as well, new interfacing and new engagement opportunities. I think some of them as well have done better, from a commercial, revenue perspective. But as I said, no one has effectively delivered, a 360. So
no pressure.
No pressure, right? So I think today the interesting thing here, we're talking to a new audience, right? And we're building a new audience. So we have the advantage of effectively to pick up a base that is already very strong, but has a massive scalability still to be delivered, that is growing at a massive speed. And effectively, when you're looking at the geographical, footprint of Mercury 13, which is Europe and Latin America. There is some very interesting economies of scale that we can deliver, and especially, there is a lot of cross-commercial opportunities that we can deliver, efficiently by working together and by having a localized effort, right? So we still, sometimes in football, tend to make more easy than what it is, all the fan engagement relationship, right? And the fan in Germany will be necessarily different from a fan in Portugal or a fan in Brazil. They all share the passion for the game. They all share, effectively, that love relationship, for our industry. But effectively, they want and they demand different things. And so effectively, what we're trying to map out, and we're trying really to be successful in execution, is how can we personalize a product, and how can we be relevant for every audience that we're trying to conquer in every demography that will be present.
Thank you. I mean, there's another aspect that the men's multi-clubs consider very important, which I'd like to get your view on this, but it's sort of the player pathway. So that it tends to be the case that, that a main club will buy sort of satellite clubs, and they'll develop players in Latin America or Portugal, traditionally Belgium maybe, and then bring them over to the first team. It's not been, as we discussed earlier, that successful, although some of these groups have made it work a little bit. Is that part of your plan, the player pathway? Is that to move players around and develop players at different stages in their career? Maybe Victoire. Right?
Yes, I can answer that question. So I think that, and I really don't, I want us to get out of this comparing to men all the time. It's very easy to go there. That's what we all know. Everyone in this stage has built their whole careers around men's football. But I assume that most of the people in the audience as well. But we're gonna move away from that because it's not serving a purpose. We have a second mover advantage with women's football. Yes, this is a product that already has an audience that is basically half of the world, that is consumed in every country in the world and has an enormous impact in terms of fan engagement, in terms of social change. It is great, and I'm never gonna say otherwise. However, when you look at women's football, we have this opportunity right now to rethink what football means for women and what we can do with it for the next 100 years of the sport. I'm a big believer that the next 100 years belong to women in the sport. And not to bring up a topic that I'm sure a lot of you are talking, but this famous kiss right here in Spain, in this very country, shows that women's football goes way beyond being a commercial product. It is a movement. It's a gender equality movement that I believe, and I know that a lot of you share this belief with me, can really change the world, and for better. And they're gonna use it as a vehicle for it. And so, going back to your question, are we gonna do the same or not as the men are doing? Of course, we need to learn from the things that have worked well. When you look at a city football group, for example, they have a very specific strategy where they have one marquee club and then smaller clubs that kind of build the ecosystem around that. We're not doing that here. Every club at Mercury 13 will be as important as the next one. Obviously, they're going to be in different leagues, and so there's going to be different growth rates because of that. Every league right now in Europe is very much at its infancy. And so we need to understand how to, firstly, begin from day one. What does the first 60 days look like when we come in? What the first 6 months look like? What the first year looks like? And for different clubs, it's going to be different things. Some clubs have been very good at cultivating talent, and that's amazing, and we should double down on that. Some others have not, and so how can we build synergies across the portfolio? And also answering your previous question, right? Why multi-club versus just one club? And so we truly believe in this ecosystem. But again, it's a really case by case, and we need to forget about what men's football has done so far, so we can build something new that, in my opinion, and I might be a little biased, is going to be a lot more powerful.
I'd like to bring Michael in as a seasoned investor in sports businesses. obviously women's football you know, in terms of interest, has grown exponentially in the last few years, but it's still, as the Carney review, you know, brought out, it's still loss-making in most respects, most clubs. How would you sell this to investors? Where's the growth coming from? I'm sure that, you know, there are lots of ways that Victoire has kind of alluded to.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I remember sitting on a stage with Victoire in 2018 when I was with FIFA and looking forward at the 2019 World Cup. And I was relatively new to women's football. And at the time, I was talking a lot about AI and blockchain, and these are fundamental technologies that are inevitable, just as the cloud is inevitable. Like, these are foundation stones of everything that actually we do day to day nowadays. And I kind of walked away from the Women's World Cup in 2019 and went, yeah, women's football is inevitable. You could see the quality of the product on the field. From then to the Euros in England to now this World Cup, the product just keeps getting better and better. The appetite from the audience keeps going up. So you just sit there going, if you're an investor coming into sport and going, well, where can I get in and get returns? And you're looking around, to me, I would be pointing them towards where's the growth, where's it coming from, where is the money shifting to? So again, if you look at some of the major sponsors in men's football and how they're starting to say, well, you know, there's been this bizarre realization that, particularly in the Western world, the wallet tends to be controlled by the female in the household, generally speaking. Why aren't we communicating with them where they are and what they're interested in? And so as sponsors start to then focus, you know, their funnel towards that, where's that been? You know, UEFA Champions League, football, women's football. So they go, okay, if you start seeing audiences showing up, the product getting better, commercial revenue starting to come in, broadcasters maybe not yet there in terms of the money, but they're starting to give it attention and putting it on air, which previously it wasn't on air. All of those things. And then, you know, to be honest, sometimes when you sat with an investor, you need to find a personal touch. And so I will sit there and use the example of my son, who's a 12-year-old boy, mad keen on football. He doesn't care if it's male or female football. He just wants to watch football. So taking him to watch Chelsea women's win the FA Cup final, I have never seen him that nervous watching a game of football. He was obsessed, like he was like grabbing hold of me. 1-0 win, 10 minutes ago, he's grabbing me going, we've got to win this, we can't lose. I'm like, what's going on? And it's fabulous to see because he and his generation are growing up just seeing a great game. So if the women's football's on and it's Chelsea, he'll watch that over watching Man City men's. I guarantee that didn't happen my day, one, because the women's game wasn't on, if there was a women's game. So I think if you're looking for growth, and all investors typically look for growth, you have to find where those various little shifts are starting to happen. And I think in women's football, it's just accelerating and accelerating. So to me, when we were having our first chat, you sat there going, okay, this is an opportunity I want to get involved in. Because again, I go back to it. I think, honestly, it's inevitable.
Yeah, I wondered where you all stand on the issue of the experience of, you know, going to women's football. There's quite a debate sometimes as to how often the women play in the bigger stadiums and whether they should play in smaller stadiums. And, you know, Arsenal have done pretty well in marketing the games in their big stadium. Barcelona has done brilliantly. But there's also been some discussion that some of the Champions League games have been in big stadiums and on a weekday night when, you know, children can't go and the crowds have been small. Victoire has talked about, you know, not having lattes or cocktails or whatever. What do you want your stadium to be like in your club or your stadiums?
I think I'll start and then I know everyone here has to pitch in because this is probably the most exciting thing that we're doing, right? And so I wanna get the audience involved a little bit here. How many women are here? Can you guys raise your hands? Okay, wow, well, this is amazing. Okay, I clap for us because I think I've been coming to the World Football Summit for many years, and it's the first time where I see so many women. It's amazing. Okay, so when you guys go to a stadium, I mean, do you go to a stadium? Let's start by that. Yes or no? Yes. Okay, so pretty much everyone that said it was a woman also goes to a stadium. Do you feel that the experience is not really tailored for you when you go there? Yes or no? Yes. Okay. Okay. Good. So this is something that we need to rethink, right? And we need to firstly work with the club that we are investing in and understand their role in their local communities. Obviously, a club like Lewis, for example, would be very different to a club in a Greek island or a club in the south of France. And by the way, these are not clubs that we're investing in. I'm just talking about them. And how do we rethink, adapting the experience to women? What does that look like? We also need to move away from the stadium experience because obviously there, it's important. We have lots of families that are coming. Women's football games are perceived as a lot safer games to go. They're cheaper, so it's more accessible for a family of 4 to go there. Usually, if not, it's just going to be the father. And beyond that, how do we speak to the rest of the world? A stat that really profoundly changed my career when I started Gloria was that 98% of football fans, never step a foot in a stadium, which is nuts. Like, think about it. I mean, we all have here the honor to be able to experience that. And how amazing is it being in a stadium and cheering for your team and hugging strangers and crying and laughing and cursing and going through the gamut of emotions. But if we think about it, the 98% of the world never gets to do that. And so and in that 98%, there's women. Women have never been invited to a stadium or even invited to like football. And I'll tell a personal story here. I've worked in football for over 10 years. This is my 3rd company. I work with the United Nations. I've done quite a lot of things in football. Still until today, when I sit with my male friends, my opinion about what happened on the pitch is not as valued as my male counterparts or male friends, essentially. And so how do we, from a club perspective, from a brand perspective, allow and say, okay, now it's time for you guys to come in and be able to change that perception, because it's a perception issue. You can't be, like, until very recently, you couldn't be a feminine woman wearing heels and also liking football, because it just didn't make sense for people, because they put you in a box and that's it. If you're like a feminine woman, then you need to like fashion and you need to, like putting makeup on. Well, here I am. I'm someone that loves putting makeup on. I love wearing high heels to my detriment. I do all these amazing things and I still love football as well. And so how, as a brand, do we make that cool? Hey, come to a stadium with your friends. Go and watch the games. Talk about it with your circles. And it's really something, and for the first time and last, I will compare it to a men's game. And it's something that I've spoken about in the past as well. But we need to rethink how to make football a part of the conversation in women's lives. For you guys, and I hope that you agree with me, and I know you will, you need an excuse to talk to each other. You just don't phone up a friend and like, hey, how was your weekend? No, you're like, did you see Messi's goal? And that's how the conversations start. We women, we don't need an excuse to talk to each other. So how do we change that narrative and basically invite women? And I think every single club within the Mercury 13 portfolio, and we hope that it expands beyond it, is going to start thinking about that and really changing the narrative.
I just want to add one thing that I think also is an interesting example, because sometimes it looks like what Victoire is saying is, for some of you might seem it's impossible to realize or it's impossible to execute, but it's not. And I think sometimes there is a lack of courage to make things happen right? I remember 2009 when I was in Manchester City, we still did not have a women's team at the time, despite we were trying to make it happen, and happen a few years after. And effectively, our audience in the stadium was 90% male. And we try really to find ways to how could we increase and personalize actually an experience for a women audience, right? That will be personalized. So we did the first, and still exists today, first experiential box for women, which was sponsored by Arve Nichols, where we had actually sold out all the time because we had cocktails, different food experience, you had a shopping experience, you had a different content experience as well with the game. So you could have also a lot of different services, so while you were, in the match. And we did actually, we started to do music concerts as well with certain bands that we knew were very attractive for the female audience. So effectively, like we did 7 days in a row of Take That, because we had effectively 90% of female audience, right, in watching the events. So I remember as well in Valencia, for instance, we were the first club to do a nursery inside the stadium, because we detected by our data that many families could not come to the game because they could not leave their kids, did not have anyone. So, and actually money is not a barrier, because sometimes also we think that we need to have a lot of money to do these kind of things. No. So it's just about having the exact understanding of what that audience needs and have the courage enough to deliver to them in perfect conditions, and that effectively they can come back and talk about it.
There is a sidebar to that, right? So I know the people who built the water system for the Etihad Stadium, and they were there for those Take That concerts, and it freaked them out because they had built a men's football stadium. And when all the women went to the toilets, they're not going to have enough water. Sometimes it's as prosaic as that, is how do you design the appropriate infrastructure for the audience that's going to attend so they feel they're invited, right? And sometimes it comes down to getting the damn toilets right. It can be as simple as that sometimes. So to me, I think there's some great lessons to learn from MLS, that when they only played in massive stadiums, it didn't work. When they had a specific stadium built for football, it started to work. Fans started to come, it started to feel full, and so on. There will be infrastructure that we inherit as part of the group that was designed for lower league or men's football. So we'll need to look at that and go, well, how do we make that appropriate for the audience that we believe is coming, that the data is telling us is coming? And how do we transform that so that women feel more inclusive, children there, but that the men still feel included, because they make up 30, 40% of the audience anyway themselves, right? So again, I think, as Victoria said, each market's going to be different. What that represents in Spain will be different to in England. Mm-hmm. We'll have to take that into consideration as well.
I mean, since the news came out of your project and what you're intending to do, I mean, without giving names away and stuff, but what kinds of clubs have been interested? I mean, could it be small clubs who are about to be closed by the men's team or something, or could it be clubs that are attached to bigger clubs, or what kind of
David doing his journalist work here. Look, it's an important question, and I'll answer to my best ability, because there's some stuff that we can't share publicly. The news of Mercury 13 had an immense amplification. We were never expecting this, honestly. We were featured in pretty much every single big media outlet in the world. And that generated a lot of interest, not only from investors, but also clubs, finally seeing that there was someone that was here to help them, that was here to make sure that they could grow. And so we started receiving an enormous influx of clubs all over the world, not only in Europe, but also in Asia, even in the United States, in Canada, in Africa. And it's become a very important, if not the most important thing that we will do in the next few years, which is choose the right clubs to invest into. And obviously you have your traditional multi-club where you go and get a second or third division team, and then you help them go up, and that is on its own a financial business. You get a first division club in a league that is about to explode. These are all things that we are tasked now and have the responsibility and fiduciary responsibility to our investors to make the best choices. I'm very confident that the group that we have put together here, the management team, represents every single aspect of the game, and so can help us analyze and make the best decision by looking at the 360 of the club. Obviously, it is a financial business at the end of the day. This is a for-profit company. We're here to change the world, but we're also here to make money for our investors and to make sure that we leave those clubs in much better conditions than we found them. And so how do we do that? It's, again, going to depend very much on the club, on its local league and its community, and what we can do from the commercial standpoint, because that's something that we can actually control. Broadcasting rights, you know, the prize money, these are things that are out of our control, and we cannot do something specifically. But the commercial side is something that we can do. And so I've already started having conversations with a number of different categories of brands that never looked at football as a possible entryway into speaking to their audience. And so we're speaking to fashion brands and beauty brands, pharmaceuticals, kids products, baby products, even fertility clinics are now interested in looking at women's football and say, okay, how can I talk to my audience? And so I think for us, it's going to really be able to build that investment thesis and be, you know, as thorough as possible when we're doing our due diligence to make sure that we're finding teams that are ready for success, and that all they need is capital and know-how to accelerate that inevitable success. And I can say, without naming any clubs, that we have found some of these amazing clubs, and we cannot wait to partner with them because we know that together we're going to be much stronger.
Thank you. That's a good answer. Do you have a view about, you know, how many players from a club should be local to the club? I mean, does it matter? I mean, I support Chelsea, and I always like it when the academy boys come through, and you know, it just, you seem to have as a fan, you have more of a bond with those players. You know, do you have any feeling about it? Will it just evolve, or will you try to have a core of players?
I would like Ebru to answer
Well,
this.
I mean,
is an Ebru question.
Well, it also depends on the local regulations, right? In some markets, there will be limits on number of foreign players to ensure that that talent pathway is well developing well for the better performance of the national teams. And of course, we've seen recently with the success of the Lionesses in the Euros, but equally I was at the Women's World Cup, obviously on the side of the Matildas, as I have a role in Australia, but you see how people do follow their heroes, heroines, so it's very important to have that local tie with the community as well, and to give those girls in the community the dream that one day they can play for this club, they can represent their country, and they can be a Sam Kerr. And the funniest thing was, we saw a lot of, you know, little boys screaming, "Mom, Mom, I want to be like Sam Kerr one day," you know? So for a boy to have a role model as a girl, I think is amazing. But I think I always believe that if your dream is not keeping you awake at night, it's not big enough, it's not aggressive enough. So whether it's the stadiums, playing in big stadiums, or you know, growing this network of investments, not only us, hopefully we will serve as an example, and there will be many, many more investment groups coming out and doing the same thing, because this industry needs that external know-how as well as the capital to jumpstart the growth. And of course, on its own, it's going to grow significantly. Dawn Airy the other day at the launch of the new season for WSL talked about how in 10 years she expects England to generate 1 billion in revenues. And it is doable. And possibly with these kinds of additional investments coming into the game, it will even reach there much, much faster than that. So in 2015, I'll quickly wrap up so others can also say their last words, but I was asked to speak at the FIFA Women's World Cup convention to talk about the commercial potential of women's football. I found that presentation the other day and looked at it, and I was like, I'm usually very aggressive and optimistic with my predictions. Even I was wrong, you know. We're like 10 times more than what I had predicted where we would be.
That's amazing.
And for your investors, what sort of time frame will they be working to, do you think? I mean, Michael, do you have a feel for...
Well, look, I think, to me, any investment in something like this, we are in the investment phase, right? So if you're coming here to get a flip in the next 2 to 3 years, this is the wrong deal for you. To me, this is a 7 to 12 year kind of process, which is pretty normal. It's going to need a lot of hard work because the sport is still in early stages, relatively speaking. And I don't think anyone's going to have an issue with that because I think, again, even those that go and look at the men's side of the game will sit there and go, well, so broadcast cycles tend to be 3 to 4 years. So if I'm doing that over 2 or 3 cycles of sponsorship and these kind of deals, okay, what has traditionally meant, right? Because investors will look at what has happened in the past in other areas and they'll try and draw a correlation across. Again, I think they'll see that the entry point is lower. And that there's a higher growth rate, so I think that will be attractive for them. So yeah, I think 7 to 12 years makes sense to me. I think I'm certainly not going to be sat there in front of the investors that we're pitching going, oh, you've got to wait 25 years for this to work. That's not the game, and I don't think they'd back me, but...
You know, I'll add something here, and actually, David, when we first met, you had told me, you know, in England, they banned women's football for 50 years. You should sue them because it took you they took 50 years out of you building this business, right? And even though we have no intentions of doing such thing, we gotta understand that. You know, when we're comparing to men's football and we're saying, for example, you know, the Premier League broadcasting rights being £5 billion and then the women's WSL being 20 million, there's a massive gap there. And we lost 50 years or even more than that, arguably. And we need to catch up to that. Now, are we going to get there? I absolutely bet my entire career on it. But I think we're going to get there much faster than 50 years. And so our investors see this. When we're talking to them, they understand that obviously it's a long-term investment because you have to have the cycles. Football works in a particular way. Every World Cup is a giant step forward. I mean, in 2027, we're going to see equal prize money. This is outrageous. I mean, it's really outrageous if you think about it. And so it is a long term, but we expect to see gains short term because of the speed of it all. I mean, women's football waits for no one, not even me. I just had a baby and I was building the deck as I was having the baby, so.
So if we were here this time next year, in an ideal world, where would we be? Would you have 1 team, 2 teams, or?
I think, David, you know, we need to play with time, right? And I think women's football is probably now the fast-growing sport in the world by a mile. The hype is tremendous. I think we are taking a lot of responsibility as well under our hands because it's not just about acquiring clubs, it's about how we build a movement that can inspire people, can inspire others to do the same, because that's also the way that the sport is going to grow faster, is effectively there is more investors, you know, and not just waiting for what the governing bodies or the leagues can do, but effectively that also investors can contribute definitely for the growth of the sport. I think there's a massive potential as well around women audience and especially about mass participation, right? Because it's one of the largest, also growing, fast-growing communities in the world. Football is one of the most played sports. I think also there is a lot in stake as well in terms of, you know, defining that right purpose, and I think that's also something that, you know, also we'll see growing. And effectively, again, I'll say that, you know, we want to grow steadily, we want to grow fast, grow steadily, but effectively make this movement a winning movement. That's the most important thing for all of us.
Absolutely. I was going to add something, but there's nothing to add there.
Okay, no, I mean that's brilliant, and I know you. I mean, things are moving in the broadcast world, and I know you can't influence it, but DAZN is putting the Champions League behind the paywall this season for the first time, really, without the YouTube. How do you think that's going to go? I mean, that's kind of it seems a bit early to me to be doing that, but
I think it's important. Again, the zone is doing, a great, I think, journey in terms, first of all, giving the space to women's football. I think as much as we go, along this journey, I think there will be dedicated channels just for women's football, and even, companies that will just focus on women's football, because definitely there is the audience. I think the zone is early, right, and is a first mover. Of course, it's a company that needs to find as well profitability, and also there is an audience that now they think as well can consume the product and can consume the services around the product, because one of the things that the zone is doing very well is in fact creating a marketplace around content, and not just that you see the 90 minutes, but that you can consume many other experiences and services around it. So I think it's good that they test, trial, and experiment, see how it goes. But I think this is only the beginning of a big transformation from the media side towards not just women's football, but also women's sports.
okay, great, thank you.
Amazing. We should take a selfie.
Yes,
Because in a year from now, we're going to come back here, and we're going to tell you how we're doing, and we hope that you guys are going to follow us in this.
Then, David.
Sorry,
Who has the
Can make us
phone?
more
Who
questions
has the
in a
phone?
year.
I've asked enough.
You have the phone.
Mike.
Shall we take
Or
it with
David,
your phone?
sorry.
What?
David, with your phone, we take
Yeah,
a
yeah,
selfie.
yeah.
There you go. Okay,
Are you
looked
good
like you
at
had fun,
selfies?
right? You had fun? It was a good session?
Have we got time?
Are you good at selfies?
No.
Or Michael, go
I'm
for
not
it.
actually.
No?
Go on, hang on. There you go, it's okay.
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 What do we have?
You put your hands up? Okay. Let's make some noise.
No, Luis.
I don't think you can see. There you go.
Got it.
Amazing.